Coming up on Network Africa, Ghanaians say their final farewell to former President Jerry Rawlings. Mali's interim president Baoundor meets with French President Emmanuel Macron as military junta which overthrew former President Keita officially dissolves. Plus, residents in Mozambique's port city of Beira struggling to pick up what's left after Cyclone Eloise made landfall in the country. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin here in West Africa, where Ghana's longest-serving leader, former President Jerry John Rawlings, has been buried. His body had been lying in state since Monday, and hundreds of people took the opportunity to pay their last respects. The funeral rituals are taking place with strict enforcement of coronavirus restrictions. Jerry Rawlings died on the 12th of November at the Korbu Teaching Hospital in the capital, Accra, after a short illness. He was 73 years old and is credited with maintaining Ghana's stability. Rawlings led a military regime for more than a decade before returning the country to multi-party democracy in 1992. Well, in his tribute to him, President Nana Akufo-Addo says history will be kind to him and render a positive verdict on his contribution to the evolution of Ghana.
I believe that history on balance will be kind to him and will render a positive verdict on his contribution to the evolution of our nation and the entrenchment of its democratic institutions and culture. It is entirely appropriate and fitting that he should receive a state funeral with full honors to express the gratitude of the nation for that contribution. My wife Rebecca and our children join me in expressing our sincere, heartfelt condolences to his beloved wife, Nana Konedu, his children, Ezanato, Yasantua, Amina, and Kimathi, and his entire families for their great loss of one of the outstanding figures of modern Ghanaian history, a man whose sense of humor was truly infectious. Comandante, rest and abide in perfect peace in the bosom of the Almighty, until we all meet again on the last day of the resurrection. Farewell, God bless, and thank you for all your help.
Well, joining us now for more on this story is Araba Kumsin, the editor at Joy News TV in Accra, Ghana. Hello, Araba. Thank you for speaking to us. Now, give us a feel of the atmosphere at the burial ceremony today.
All right, so it was a very somber mood at the Independence Square, or the Black Star Square, where the burial service took place. People from all walks of life came in to pay their last respects to a man who is dearly loved by all, in spite of the criticisms that many have, the critiques that many have made against him. And so it was a somber mood. It was quite a lengthy service. You had the president giving his tribute, and in it, he stated that at a point in time, he and Mr. Rawlings did not see eye to eye, but all that changed after 2015. And there were times when, after that, he would go and seek advice from Mr. Rawlings. And since then, they've become very close. And so it was very sad for him to hear of his passing. A tribute was read on behalf of the widow, Nana Kunedu Ajiman Rawlings. It was read by her daughter, Amina, And it was a heartfelt one. She talked about how strong their bond is, and it's very clear for everyone to see. Anytime they're out in the public, both he and his wife Nana Kunedu always displayed affection towards each other. So it was really a sad ceremony, but that was expected. Since then, the body has been conveyed to the Armed Forces Military Cemetery, where the second part of the burial ceremony is scheduled to take place.
Yes, I was just going to ask because there are reports that he would be laid beside former President Kwame Nkrumah. How true is this?
Well, that's not true. Actually, Mr. Nkrumah was buried, former President Kwame Nkrumah was buried in his hometown in the Western region. But former President Rawlings will be buried here at the military cemetery in Accra. And he'll be buried where high-ranking military officers are usually buried, and also where former presidents and high-ranking personalities are buried. So here is where he's going to be buried. This is the same place that former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan was also buried. So Mr. Rawlings is being buried in Accra, not next to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who has been buried in his hometown in the Western region.
All right, thank you for clearing that up for us. Now, to many Ghanaians, what is the legacy, Jerry Rawlings is leaving behind, even as he's been laid to rest?
Well, in as much as he's been criticized for his excesses, there's no denying the fact that Mr. Rawlings contributed significantly to the development of democracy in the country. Now, he was the first president of the Fourth Republic. He supervised, military rule, and then he became president. He was elected president, served for 2 terms, and then stepped down. So he's been in power, longest-serving president. He's been in power for 20 years. And so his contribution to democracy cannot be underestimated, even though some of his political detractors say that he didn't do much to help democracy. But I guess that for many Ghanaians, what they will remember about him is a man who was willing to roll up his sleeves, get into the gutter with them, and do as they're doing, because he believed that everybody should be equal and Ghanaians should have equal opportunities. So for many Ghanaians, the principles of poverty and accountability will also be very clear on their minds, even as they mourn his passing today.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Araba Kumsin, editor at Joy News TV, Accra, Ghana. Thank you for your reporting. Well, Zimbabwe's Foreign Minister Sibusiso Moyo is among 3 top government officials that are being buried at the Heroes Acre in the capital, Harare, after they succumbed to COVID-19. The others are Transport Minister Joel Bigi Matiza and Prisons Chief Paradise Willins Zimondi. Now, the country has recorded a surge in COVID-19 cases since the festive season. More than 32,000 Zimbabweans have been infected with COVID-19 since the outbreak, and more than 1,100 people have died. The Catholic Church in Tanzania is warning of a surge in COVID-19 infections in the country, and that's contradicting President John Magufuli's narrative that there is no virus in his country. In a letter on Tuesday, Bishop Gervas Nyasonga of the Tanzanian Episcopal Conference said the church had seen a rise in funeral services, attributing it to possible new wave of coronavirus infections. In June last year, President Magufuli declared the East African nation coronavirus-free, saying that prayers had helped the country beat the pandemic. He had also mocked people who were wearing masks. His government stopped publishing official data about coronavirus cases and also fatalities. Mr. Magufuli is now also warning health officials against acquiring COVID-19 vaccines, saying that they could harm the population without giving any evidence. Here in Nigeria, nurses and midwives across the country are complaining about the shortage of manpower, especially during this time of COVID-19 pandemic. According to them, the profession requires at least 800,000 active nurses. Sadly, they can only boast of barely 125,000 across the country. They also accuse the government of not paying attention to their demands, especially their hazard allowance.
The world obviously cannot do without the services of healthcare workers, and the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how important their role is. In the course of fighting the virus, some of them get infected, while some sadly lose their lives. At the Quadrennial National Delegates Conference in the nation's capital, one of the burning issues for discussion is their welfare. They pledge total commitment to their duties irrespective of government's actions.
We owe a contract with God Almighty. And when you look at our pledge, we say, I solemnly pledge before God in the presence of this assembly. The first pledge of a nurse is with God Almighty. The second pledge, because we praise, we vouch that our conscience shall bear us. The second pledge, the second allegiance we have is to our conscience. Whether government does it right or not, we are committed to continue to fulfill our obligation because of the duty of care for the people we are caring for.
The National President, Nigeria Labour Congress, Ayuba Waba, promises to take their complaints up with the government.
Despite lack of motivation, and even in some cases, payment of your entitlement, because I'm aware that in such a situation, health workers globally have been entitled to hazard and inducement allowances to encourage them and motivate them to continue to do the more. As we speak, in the second wave, there are many areas that are not paid. And I will urge government to try to respect those understanding that we have actually reached, including with the unions, to try to make sure that you are well encouraged.
He charged them to build a synergy among themselves.
What the issue is about also us being very sensible to be sure that we are all united, even in the cause of making sure that we're able to represent our members. Because they said nobody can clap with one hand.
Many nurses and midwives in this auditorium are optimistic that the federal government would encourage them by meeting their demands in order to return the lost glory of the profession.
Mali's interim president, Puntland, has met with French President Emmanuel Macron. Mr. Ndor, who served as defense minister and used to be the Air Force chief, is tasked with presiding over Mali's 18-month transition back to civilian rule following a military coup. Mr. Macron had recently said that France could adjust its military operations in West Africa's Sahel region. Diplomatic and military sources expect a partial French withdrawal to be announced by mid-February. Meanwhile, Mali's military junta, which overthrew former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta 5 months ago, has been officially dissolved, according to a government decree. The decree was signed by the transitional president Puntland and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane. Dissolution of the junta was among the demands made by the regional bloc, the Economic Community of West African States. Senior military personnel still hold several key posts in the 25-member transitional government. In the meantime, the army in Mali says it has killed 100 jihadists in a joint offensive with French forces. In a statement, Mali's military said another 20 Islamist insurgents were captured in the operation, which ran throughout January. Militants control large parts of the Sahel Desert region. Since an Islamist insurgency erupted in northern Mali in 2012, the violence there has spread to neighboring Niger and also Burkina Faso. France has more than 5,000 military personnel in the region as part of a long-running operation intended to stop violence by Islamist militants. Meanwhile, a Swiss mediation body says nomadic and farming communities in central Mali have also agreed to stop fighting. The Center for Humanitarian Dialogue said the Fulani and Dogon people signed 3 peace deals after months of mediation. Still ahead on the program. Artists say Pace sprays paints iconic Beyond Walls frescoes in Cape Town to preach unity in the world. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. A delegation of senior United Nations officials on Monday visited the federal member state FMS of Puntland in Somalia's northeast to meet with its leadership on the provision of support. The UN envoy highlights how the world body's current activities in Puntland ranges from support for ongoing reconciliation, security and stabilization efforts to providing humanitarian and development assistance.
We have come to discuss with the President and his ministers the work the United Nations is currently doing in Puntland and how the United Nations could better support Puntlanders in 2021. Over the past 2 years, Puntland has continued to make notable advances in the democratization process, strengthening of governance and public finance management, security sector reform, and infrastructure development. UNHCR also provided support to Puntland's COVID-19 response with the distribution of sanitary materials and personal protective equipment to some 19,000 people, as well as livelihood interventions such as cash grants, entrepreneurial and vocational training, and educational assistance to more than 5,000 people. We're also pleased that UNHCR was able to work closely with the Puntland administration in helping with the response to last year's devastating floods and Cyclone Gati. The World Food Programme is also helping internally displaced people from 3,500 households who have self-organized into 20 farmers' cooperative groups. They're being supported with climate change irrigation infrastructure, such as solar pumps, and training on agricultural livelihoods, organizational development, and conflict resolution.
Residents in Mozambique's port city of Beira are struggling on Tuesday to pick up what's left after Cyclone Eloise made landfall in the country. Crops, homes, and infrastructure have all been destroyed, and thousands have been displaced in Mozambique, in particular in an area that's still recovering from Cyclone Idai in March 2019. In the port city of Beira alone, 8,700 people are living in 16 temporary shelters after their homes were destroyed. Meanwhile, hundreds of residents in Mozambique's Buzi district are waiting at Guara Guara administrative post to be evacuated after their houses were also destroyed. Some residents say they've been queuing for 3 days now. However, the National Institute for Disaster Risk Management and Reduction says the operations are being carried out in a way that ensures everyone's safety. UN's humanitarian office also says there are several people that have died and dozens injured and several thousands displaced.
At least 6 people have died and 12 have been injured, according to preliminary figures from the government. But that number may go up as more information becomes available and the extent of the damage is better known. More than 176,000 people have been affected by the cyclone and the flooding in Mozambique, including more than 8,300 people who have been displaced. The most urgent humanitarian needs identified so far include food, tents, drinking water, hygiene kits, COVID-19 prevention materials, mosquito nets, and blankets. As humanitarian partners, we're already responding to multiple needs in Mozambique, including to the conflict in Cabo Delgado in the north and the recent impact of tropical storm Cyclone. More resources are urgently needed to ensure that we can scale up quickly to respond to the needs from tropical cyclone Eloise.
The tropical cyclone comes at a very difficult time in Mozambique. January to March is the peak of the lean season when people struggle the most to find food. Latest statistics, which were released on the 14th of January from the IPC, Acute Food Insecurity and Acute Malnutrition Analysis, indicates that over 2.9 million people are facing high levels of food insecurity, in both rural and urban areas in southern, central, and northern provinces of Mozambique.
A total of 32 accommodation centers have been activated in Sofala province to provide temporary shelter for over 15,000 families. Now, IOM's 160 staff in the area are working closely with the government of Mozambique, United Nations, and other humanitarian partners to ensure coordination with the humanitarian response. Assessments began literally within hours of Cyclone Eloise's departure in order to determine the extent of displacement damage and the needs of local residents.
In a bid to support one of the sectors worst hit by COVID-19, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has launched the Tourism Equity Fund. The president was speaking at a virtual launch of the over 1.2 billion rand Tourism Equity Fund aimed at driving transformation in the sector. President Ramaphosa explains the funding, which will be in form of grant funding or loans, would allow black sector businesses to acquire equity for new developments and expanding existing ones.
If the tourism industry is to play its role in aiding the economic recovery in the wake of COVID-19, it must grow and transform. So this effort that we are all about today is going to contribute to this sector growing, but at the same time it must transform. The industry has responded to COVID-19 with a tourism recovery plan. And it entails three strategic themes. Firstly, it's about reigniting demand. Secondly, it's rejuvenating supply. And thirdly, strengthening enabling capability. Now, the tourism sector is resilient and can rebound from periods of crises. And we've seen this industry doing precisely that.
The fund is timely in that it will be instrumental in helping in the recovery and the reconstruction of the sector, which has been devastated by the pandemic. It is necessary because not only will this fund help us to crowd in private sector investment in the rejuvenation process, but it will also ensure that we are able to see an inclusive sector.
As we end the program today, a French artist, Sepe, is trying to create a global project he hopes will foster unity in an increasingly polarized world. In his Beyond Walls series, the 31-year-old graffiti artist links street and land art in cities across the world, often depicting a close-up of two people's hands gripping each other's forearms. Take a look.
On a sandy patch with tufts of grass in Cape Town's Philippi shanty town, French artist Sepe checks a laminated image before adding details to a huge fresco spray painted on the ground, part of a global project he hopes will foster unity in an increasingly polarized world. Guided by wooden pegs, Sepe painstakingly builds up the final image of two hands clasping each other's forearms in the windswept corner of an old cement factory and surrounded by a sea of wooden and tin shacks.
For me, I really trust that it's only together that humanity can respond to the biggest challenge of our time. And this is this message that I want to do by making huge fresco with biodegradable paint directly on the grass. It is a road-wide project, and the idea is to create the biggest human chain to speak about togetherness. And today in Cape Town, this is the 9th step of this project.
Sepe was named one of the most influential young artists by Forbes magazine for his Beyond Walls movement, linking street art and land art in cities across the world and best viewed from aerial footage.
The goal of art, I think, is to grab the attention of the people. So I have to find a new way to impact people again, and that's why I try to paint directly in the ground and to make huge fresco, and the people always was, oh, what is it? And I know that I can grab the attention to give message and optimistic message and hope.
He also has painted his temporary biodegradable images on lawns from Yamoussoukro in Côte d'Ivoire to Champ de Mars next to the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Last year, he painted a large biodegradable fresco on the lawn of the United Nations European headquarters in Geneva to mark the 75th anniversary of its founding.
And that's where we end the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.